Hello, and welcome to episode 58 of Trails in the Pod. I'm Colin, that's Kevin.
Okay, we got a good podcast today about political malaise, about electoral gridlock, about a sense of despair over the prospects for the future of this country. That's right, we are talking about the 2024 presidential. Trails from Zero, Chapter 2 of the Kaseki series. My bad.
Yeah, I'm not going to go so far as to say that Crossbell and the United States are exactly the same, and I wouldn't really push the parallel that far. But there are definitely some resonances that, honestly, when I played through it a couple of years ago, I don't think were really there. But they are there now.
It's a really good chapter. It's so much to talk about for the main quest, for the characters, for the plot, the side quest. This is going to be 2 episodes, and I think most of these chapters will be 2-part episodes, and then that leads to a shift in the content that we're putting out for the podcast. Now, Colin, do you want to explain in more detail?
Yeah. So this is something that I had been thinking about a while, and then I talked to Kevin about it pretty recently. The long and short of it is that I am pretty busy. Specifically, I need to be spending more time doing academic research, which means that I have to be spending less time playing video games. But definitely want to still keep the podcast going. So what we've decided to do is cut one of the sidebar episodes each month and aim to have it so that 2 of the episodes are on the chapter for that month, and then we have our Buffer State Project episode at the end of the month. So you guys are listening to our Chapter 2 episode of this. This is early September. Next week, you'll get the second part of that. And then at the end of that month, we'll release our episode on the great game, Buffer States in Central Asia. And then we'll take a little bit of a break and then come back in, what's the next month? October, and do Chapter 3 and another Buffer State episode.
It's usually October. They may have changed it up this year. I'm not certain, but I want to make one thing clear, Colin. We, for this new schedule, will be doing more in-depth analyses on the Kiseki games. More time devoted per chapter than one chapter per one episode per chapter. So this will not be any reduction in the quality or the content or the quantity of how we talk about the Kaseki games. Per capita, it will increase compared to what we did for most of FC, SC, and the third.
I mean, definitely it's also going to cut down on the fluff a little bit. I feel like, sometimes we had great sidebar episodes, but sometimes we were like, okay, we need to think of a sidebar episode and let's just go ahead and do that. And, it's not like we're never going to do sidebar episodes. I still owe you Planescape Torment, which right now we have planned for like December to do that. I'm really pushing it up to the end of the year. But we will have stuff like that, but we want to make sure that when we record an episode, there's a purpose to it. It's not just we need to get an episode out.
I think that the in-depth analyses, it will only increase from here on out with this new format, and I cannot wait to do 2-part episodes for these chapters. There's so much in them, Colin.
No, yeah, these are some thick boys. These are some in-depth chapters. So why don't you give your overall impression on Chapter 2? We can talk about it in the aggregate, and then we'll start talking about side quests.
Overall impression, 9 out of 10 at the very minimum. I thought it hit on all cylinders. The main quest, what we learned about Crossbell and how people interact with their home, it's superlative. I've rarely seen such engagement, such despair portrayed so hauntingly. We got a good mix of side quests, except fishing, good God, and fleshing out minor characters. Some people I thought was minor became major. We got a new temporary, I think permanent party member later on in Noel, and like I said, 9 out of 10 is my floor for this chapter.
Why not give it a 10 out of 10? What's it missing that you just can't give it a 10 out of 10 off the bat?
I would say some of the stuff, let's say the hollow art, gotta look up the hollow core art was frustrating, trying to brute force it. I eventually had to look it up on my own. I guess I didn't like the animeification of Ilya sexually assaulting people, basically.
Yeah, this is where we start to see the trope that if you have big boobs, some characters might just start touching them.
Don't like it.
which I'm not a big fan either. But let's talk about side quest then, because I think your main criticism is the Enigma combat test side quest. We are assigned, hey, you have these new orbital things. We're trying to collect data on them. So come here, and in combat, we want you to cast the art that gives you stealth. They don't tell you what it's called, and you have to figure it out. And my opinion on this is that this quest exists in order to teach you how to use your detective notebook to look through all of the arts, familiarize yourself with the options that are available, and then figure out how to achieve your required result or your desired result.
I agree completely. There is a pedagogical purpose for this side quest for a good amount of stuff that we do in the game. This good, do this, and you have to learn something new or go in depth to an existing part of the game playing structure. But Colin, I'm fucking stupid. I'm a stupid boy, a little dunce cap on my head, and I was
I mean,
thinking for so long it was a different space art that I kept casting, thinking, is this bugged? Why aren't I getting this quest progressed? Until I looked it up and said, oh, you need this kind of orbital math. And to be clear, I think orbital math, the addition, subtraction with the lines to get different builds of the arts and the chords, is a very good feature. I just wish there was a bit more signposting.
but I don't understand how there isn't enough signposting, because the person says, do the art that hides you from your enemies, and one art says this gives you stealth. What even other art did you think was going to work?
There's an art that mass blinds the enemies.
But that's not what it said. It didn't say blind the other enemies. It says hide you specifically. Hide the person it's
Hiding,
cast on. That's
but
what she
like,
said.
I thought it was like a plural you, so you want to blind the enemies so they can't see the group.
I feel like you read too much into it and then didn't bother to look past the one that you thought would do it. Because once you get to I forget if it's Mirage or whatever, but the white ones, it says stealth right on the tin.
Okay, so the next side quest.
I mean, to be fair, I also looked it up because I wanted to double check myself. But I don't think that it's that difficult.
Little dunce cap on my head. You know what is difficult to figure out? Why do the militaries need outside people to come kick their asses and teach them how to do their jobs?
And let's be clear, it's not just the Guardian Force that does this. In Liberl, twice we had to do that. And at least with with the Bracer Guild, it's a recognized body. There are some very powerful people in there. They kind of know Joshua and Estelle down in Roland, so it's phrased as kind of a fun thing, but then also, okay, you've got some power. Why don't you whip our people up into shape? These people are calling the police to train the armed forces. And mind you, in our police force, only one of them uses a gun.
So there's that. I'm not sure how much behind the curtain peeking that we can do with this side quest. It's a fairly standard tournament style. We get to fight Noelle or Noel. I'm not sure if it's one or two syllables. And if you win against her, you get the bonus DP detective points at the end. It's a prefiguring of she'll join the party in a temporary capacity, and I've said I think permanent next chapter, the one after, and we get more interactions with the CGF. And I will say, Colin, do you agree that the CGF is kind of moribund? I think it makes sense because they're not meant to be able to defeat Calvard or the Empire. They're more meant to be a tripwire. Like, we are technically sovereign, so we have a military of sorts.
We talked a little bit about why, how they can serve both Erebonia and Calvard's interests by stymieing an invasion from the other side. Also, I think that the Guardian Force does have the responsibility for taking care of monster attacks and potentially crime on the outside of the city proper. So for Amorica and for Mainz and even St. Ursula. What I found more interesting than just calling it moribund was looking at the differences in Guardian Force culture between Tangram Gate and Belgard Gate. Because I think it's Tangram, the one that Sonia Bales is stationed at.
Yeah.
And she is making sure that everybody's being whipped up into shape. We were kind of giving the Guardian Force shit for doing it, but Bales' whole point of getting the SSS to help, is because we proved ourselves in the previous chapter against the Mafia, and so she recognized that there are challenges that the Guardian Force isn't really equipped to face with. We have faced them, so this is a good way to get us some practice and to get the soldiers some practice. Through doing that, we can see that she's kind of she's a harsh taskmaster, which gets results. She's not messing around. She takes her job seriously. If you contrast that, what?
Question, Colin,
For me.
for you. For her obvious qualities and competences and skills, why choose the CGF? Wouldn't that be like a dead end career option if you have this kind of ambition and talent? Why not some other governmental body or even the police department? Or why the CGF? Why would someone with any talent go into the Guardian Force given what we know and can surmise about it?
I mean, patriotism? The belief that not everybody should be terrible, so if you're good at your job and you care about Crossbow, that you should join? Like, the contrast that I was going to draw here was that if you go to Belgard Gate, I mean, the head honcho isn't even in his office, right? Randy
No.
points out that he's barely there. He's mostly just out partying. His office is huge. It's ostentatious, whereas Sonya Bales's is not. It's a striking facet, but it also goes to show that just because in Belgard the defense isn't taken as seriously, sorry, the defense isn't taken that seriously. The head honcho is not very good at his job. You also have people like Sonya that do care and are making sure that the Guardian Force is doing the most that they can do. Plus, at some point, the head honcho's got to die or be sacked or retired or get arrested. And then maybe that'll open up a spot for Bales to be promoted. Who knows?
I've said before, I really enjoy how the head is a colonel because that feels about right for Crossbell's position and the amount of attention and funding that they give to the military. And even the name, the Guardian Force, I would wonder, now that I talk about it, how similar is it in Japanese to the Self-Defense Force? Is it meant to be a parallel? In English, it seems to be a pretty strong parallel to the defensive-oriented nature, Guardian, Self-Defense, what have you. And I'd be interested, does this exist in the Japanese?
Well, that's definitely something that we should take a look at, maybe before the next episode. Slash, perhaps somebody can point it out for us on Twitter, because we always get, nice little tidbits like that once our episodes go live. But yeah, I'd be curious to know that too. The problem with working on things in translation is that what seems like parallels very often might not be parallels. There was, for example, the Reverie Corridor in Liberl. I had put out like, okay, well, we have Trails into Reverie now. But, of course, Trails into Reverie was not called that in English. It was called Hajimari no Kiseki, Trails of Beginnings. So even though in the localization, people might think that there is a parallel with that game, at least with the title, there's not. There is the Reverie Corridor, which I believe used the same word, but you have to run through multiple layers to see if things are actually designed or if it's just a happenstance of translation over multiple companies, too.
You know what's a happenstance of translation?
What?
When we go to West Crossbell Highway and we translate the monster from alive to dead.
Kevin, I want you to take 5 minutes, and I want you to sit in the
Yeah.
corner, and I want you to think about what you just did. And I want you to reflect and ask, was that transition really, really
No.
good? Do you feel proud about that one? Do you feel like it really gets across the ideas that you want to get across?
I think it's a good transition and translation because we are translatio, transplacement of our intrepid SSS members from Crossbell to the highway.
Okay, so this joke only makes sense if you know Latin, which I think most of our audience does not. So let's just spell it out a little bit. Translate in English means languages, right? English to Japanese, Japanese to English, whatever. In Latin, translatio means to carry something from one place to the other, which makes sense for languages. You take your Greek text and you take it and move it into Latin. That's a metaphorical sense. But also, for example, if you find saint relics and you move them into the church in the city, that's called a translation because you're carrying it from the countryside into the city center.
Just like the relics of Saint Stephen, we're kicking ass and taking names in the West Crossbell monster extermination. And let me tell you what, this was a pretty forgettable side quest.
Yeah, I do not remember what the monster is, nor do I remember it for the East Crossbell monster extermination. It feels like it's just there to give us DP.
Some of these we've talked about at some detail in the past.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that
I'm not sure what more to say.
there's not really a whole lot of reason to spend dwelling on that, when instead we get cooler side quests that actually show us some, like, world building, like the Testament training, where they go ahead and they hire the SSS to train gang members so that they don't get shot by the mafia.
And again, like the military, there's some unanswered questions, Colin, about okay, you want the police to come train your quasi legal, if not illegal, literal gang. Literal gang.
Man, they are street gangs. They are not legal.
And the police isn't like, yeah, why don't you have everyone with all your top lieutenants come in this place that we agreed to with a date and time and location so we can arrest you. Instead, they're like, sure, we'll make you more comfortable fighting in the open street.
Like, my favorite is how easy it was to convince Lloyd. Because at first they're like, wait a minute, we're the police. Why would we train you how to fight? And then, I think his name is Sabas? I forget his name, but the bald guy, the second in command. He's just like, no, you don't understand. This is for self-defense. You fight with tonfas. Therefore, you don't do any damage to anybody, and we also want to learn that. And then Lloyd immediately, despite the fact that he's killed numerous monsters, despite the fact that he's fought with them before and have dealt some damage, breaking bones and things like that, goes, oh, yeah, no, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I'll teach you how to defend yourself because the mafia is the stronger threat and they have guns. And these teenagers, they don't have guns. Meanwhile, they live right next to a fucking weapon factory. You think they should just buy some guns.
Leaving aside the fact that the Tonfas are great honking bits of steel, of metal, swinging at someone's extremities, and I believe they carry a concussive force on top of that, it's a bit odd, the synapses connections from A to B to C to let's go do this. The actual fight, similar to the one against the soldiers, you have different waves that you have to clear. They start off fresh, the two gangs, and then all of them together, and you get extra DP if you can beat all of them.
The only annoying thing about the fight is that I'm trying to do my best to scan as many enemies as I can so that I can get more rewards from the police department, and every single one of them are different people. So you have to scan every single one of them individually, which takes time. And if you don't want to use battle scopes, because I just like using Tio's ability, it basically removes Tio from the first two fights, because she has to spend all of her time analyzing.
Exactly. And Tia is the only mage that we have. I mean, Ellie is support, but that's different than being a mage in the Porky configuration, I would say.
I mean, I think it depends on how you design the characters. I mean, that's the whole point of the court system.
Yeah,
I will say, though, that so far the game has not really required us to think too hard about all of that. And I know this because I set up Tio in order to do the Enigma combat test, which is a very inefficient setup, and it's just there in order to get me the holocore art. And I have not changed it since. And I beat the whole chapter with it. Question for you, Kevin, because it's very easy for us to shit on this quest because the police are helping street gangs. Fine. That seems to just be something that the SSS is comfortable with doing. We're not supposed to treat these gangs as the criminals that they're actually depicted to be. That we seem to be expected to treat them as if they're more... I don't know if virtuous is the right word, but it's more complicated than just they're criminals, therefore bad guys. So what do you think about the Testaments? Like, we see a little bit more of them now.
They have a code that is orthogonal to the law versus lawlessness that is the binary spectrum that the police operate in, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does make sense.
So it's similar for order and disorder, but how they go about it and the legitimacy of institutions and what institutions, that is different. Lloyd seems to, because these are street gang, does not trust them, does not want to work with them, but he is very easily persuaded. My goodness, man. So there's that. The gangs do not share this compunction. They were the ones who reached out. The SSS, can provide.
Well, to be fair, the test the
Yes,
Testaments reached out. The Vipers were
yeah.
very against it.
But the Testaments seem to be, and from what we've seen with the bar, I think the Trinity bar, I believe it's called, the SSS coming and doing this will
Mhm.
help their goals and strategies. So they want to do it. They don't have this antipathy towards the police, which is towards the SSS in particular, even though they beat them up. And I just think that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, so what do you think about their leadership? We have Wazi, and I think his name is Abbas.
Wazzy gives the impression of there's some greater, bigger scheme going on. He just looks like a planner, like a plotter. I mean, obviously he's not the muscle. That's a boss. And he seems to be relatively competent. Has his own moral code. He does not want to work with the mafia, with Vivash, and he seems less hot-headed than the Vipers' leadership. More analytical.
Calm, cool, collected. I mean, also, he's not the muscle, as you say, but he is skilled at combat, and he did fight Wald. That's how this whole rivalry between the two of them started, and I think he won.
And we did play as him in the last bit of the prologue, I do believe. And he held his own. He was not a detriment
Yeah, I think
to
you're right.
the capture the mafia soldiers. I thought the fights themselves, the first two were easy, and so was the last, because Vandy's bomb, blind bomb, and that just, you get, counterattack, repost. It makes it so much easier. A lot of enemies have resistance to blinding, but the ones that don't, Colin, that is one of the most OP combat moves in the game so far.
Definitely, especially since the whole if you miss, then you can counter. I think it's introduced in Trails from Zero, and it's very helpful. Also, I was going to say Randy works very well for this fight too because of Crimson Gale. I mean, you have a decently large
Yeah,
area of effect, does a lot of damage, but also then burning, and they
yes.
have to move to attack you. They're probably going to die on the way.
He's one of the best units. I'm going to say something maybe heretical and tell me if you agree or not. Are you ready, Colin? Are your loins girded?
But my loins are girded.
Lloyd is not a good unit.
I disagree. I think that well, there are some skills that you get later on that help a lot, but it also depends on how you use him. Randy is definitely better in terms of just dealing damage. What Lloyd is good at doing, he takes good hits,
Yes.
and his crafts are very good for support. For example, giving everybody a strength buff is excellent. We get one that is like a line that also, I believe it
Yeah.
also does impede, but even if it doesn't, its line attacks like that are great because you can hit things from anywhere. Now, Randy also has that too with his salamander thing, but that doesn't make Lloyd a bad unit. I think that he could stand to be a little bit more powerful, but I could also probably get some more strength out of him if I adjust my quartz setup.
He's a jack of all trades. He is good, decent, I should say, at a fair amount, but he's not as good as support as Ellie, not as good a mage as Tia, not as good as DPS frontlines tank as Randy. He can fill in for a pinch.
Well, I like how you say he's not as good as upfront DPS tank. Those are two different things, and he is a better tank than Randy.
There was a verbal comma in there, Colin Behrens.
You can't have a verbal punctuation mark. They are remnants of writing. It doesn't exist.
He is not as good as DPS, comma, new thought, new entry, changing topic, go on, or tank.
Kevin, this is like when we talk and you just change the subject
Yeah.
of your sentences
So
without telling me that you're changing the subject.
you have to be verbally agile. No, intellectually agile.
God damn it, man.
But
All
I
right,
do
so
say
last
he's not as
question.
good. He's B's and Randy is an A. I think Randy has more HP growth in defense as base.
I'd have to check it out when I next boot up the game. I do agree that Randy's a better unit, but Randy is. I love Randy's character. I love his unit. I love his crafts. I love his S craft. I love Randy. Randy's perfect.
Brief 2 second sidebar. Again, we are getting hints that there's something going on with Randy and the past, and I think the military or maybe connections to the underworld. He knows so much more than what he's letting on. When we met with, I forget what it was exactly, but Randy recognized something or knew someone or in the later portions of the chapter about Yin.
He knows who. Yeah, he. There was a term that's an Asian term
Yeah.
meaning assassin that he knew what it was.
And there was something either reading the letter or meeting someone. He had some recognition. I think it was separate from the assassin. And they were like, "Oh, what's going on?" He's like, "It's nothing." I think it's separate, but I could be the same thing.
So I think what you're talking about, and if not, it's still a point that I want to make, is that the story that the SSS is given by Randy for the reason why he's joining the SSS is because he got kicked out of the CGF for fucking too many girls. But when you actually go to Belgar Gate and you're talking to people, you run into a soldier named Mirail. Mireille? I'm not really sure how to pronounce her name. I've only
That
really
sounds
read it.
about right.
But in any case, he's kind of teasing her, like, oh, you love me, this kind of a thing. But she reveals that there has not been any allegations of Randy doing bad stuff with women. This is not at all why he left. What really seems to have been the case, at least from what we can gather so far, is that Randy was disgusted with the incompetency of the head honcho and therefore left. But then the question becomes, well, why didn't he just say that? What is he trying to hide?
I'm a sexual pest, if not predator, is not a great cover story. Well, on the one hand, it is because it makes
It's
you look
not.
so bad. Why would you bother digging further? You know?
Right, but at least so far, it seems like the truth is so much better than the lie.
And yeah, so unless there's some external factor that's preventing him, because you're right. But on the other hand, hi, I'm a scumbag. People aren't generally inclined to go looking for examples to counter your admission that I'm here 'cause I'm a bad person, you know?
It is kind of funny too how like he starts off by saying, "I'm here because I'm too much of a womanizer," and everyone's like, "Yeah, okay." Not to be fair, womanizing is not bad, right? There has been no sense that anything was unconsensual. Well, I mean,
Well,
it
it's
depends.
power
If it's a
imbalances.
soldier fraternizing with another soldier, there is no power imbalance. We have had no indication that Randy had power over anybody. The only thing that would make it be a problem is if it's causing instability in the ranks, right? Jealousies leading to infighting, which would then destroy unit morale. Maybe. But then again, that doesn't appear to be what had happened. So, my question for you, Kevin Bloomfield, you've picked up a couple of times that there is something going on with Randy's past. Do you have any working theories?
I'm just gonna spitball more than have a theory. Just say there's connections to the underworld of some sort, because there was something with the mafia, with the gangs, not the gangs, but the mafia Rivage. Something of his. I forget what exactly. But it was that context. With the military, he seems to be more principled.
I think something that you were bringing up, and maybe not, but I'll bring it up now, is that Garcia Rossi, we'll talk about him when we get to the main quests, but when the SSS is meeting with Ravash, Garcia like pulls Randy back in and says something about his hair.
And I forget the context exactly. Let me see if I can find it quickly. Okay, so there's something in Azure. No, not Azure. In Zero. It was Zero. Okay, I'll stop. But it was Zero.
Okay, if you're no, don't look things up. Get
Okay.
rid of this. Stop looking it up. Don't look it up. You're going to run into spoilers if you do that. Stop.
Okay, so there's something, but it
Just
was with
stop.
Garcia. You're right. Like he called him back in because he was in the he had met had a brief contact talk with Garcia.
And Randy plays it off cool and then walks away, but clearly, like, it meant something. Like, there's a reason why Garcia wanted to talk to him. So, do you have any theories as to why?
I assume. Okay, again, Colin. What's the most anime fucking interpretation? Something involving his parentage or background. He's from the streets, and I don't know. He's Garcia's son or nephew or fucking whatever.
Maybe he's the bastard son of Garcia.
There is a pre-existing something between them.
I'm just going to bring this up out of order now. How do you feel having called Ellie the bastard daughter of Mayor McDowell?
Okay, I think I was putting too much credit to the intellectual capabilities of fucking Lloyd. It's like, okay, what if you had a coworker whose last name was Biden, who grew up wealthy and was politically connected? Would you think, wow, what a common last name?
Yeah, I do feel like at some point it would have come up in conversation. You know, like,
Or someone else. Hey, oh, you have the mayor's granddaughter. Like, this is one of the top people in the country.
and like everybody else seemed to have known it. You know what I'm saying?
Grace, why didn't Grace say something?
I mean, it does boggle my mind that it didn't like, hey, by the way, while they're like having lunch or something, oh, Ellie, by the way, I noticed that your last name is the same. Any connection?
She would not lie.
I mean, she was hiding it.
But there's not volunteering, and then there's just lying.
Well, I mean, it's not just not volunteering. For instance, during the secret quest in chapter one, there's the kitty cat quest. You have to go around all the houses in the residential district. When you show up to Ellie's mansion, she's hiding. She hides behind a post because she doesn't want to be recognized. She is actively hiding that part of her.
Okay, so there's that. But also, maybe she put too much stock in her in the int scores of her teammates. 'Cause my
Maybe.
God.
And this is the master detective, by the way. Like, it's not Randy or Tio that's like there for support. This is the guy who's like, let's think through all of the evidence and come to a conclusion.
Oh,
Anyway,
we'll get to that later. But that's
yeah, we are jumping ahead a bit.
just fishing in the door. But speaking,
See, I feel like we've been extending this out because Kevin doesn't want to talk about probably the best quest in the game, fishing for ingredients. Why don't you tell us your thoughts about fishing for ingredients?
I skipped it.
So, for those who don't know of this quest off the top of your head, you get this in Long Lao. Long Lao, I think it's the name, but it's the Chinese inspired inn, and they need a certain kind of fish in order to make their dish. Specifically, they're looking for 5 eels, which you can get pretty easily if you use your novice rod with an earthworm on the pier in the harbor district. It's not guaranteed, so you have to make sure that you have a lot of them, which means you have to go grinding for them in the East Crossbell Highway.
Colin, the other things I could sort of see why you would want the police involved. Getting the SSS because you need fish for your menu seems a bit of a disjunct between what the police do as a governmental body.
Well, to be fair
I will not be fair. I
to Shan Shan, and
refuse to
to
be
be fair
fair.
to the city of Cross, well, I will be fair. So if you there's been like a month gap between chapter 1 and chapter 2, right? And in the beginning of chapter 2, the members of the SSS do kind of reflect on all the odd jobs that they've been doing, like helping out with traffic control, helping random people out with stuff. They are kind of a bracer replacement. But on top of that, Shan Shan did not know they were police. She just heard that these are people who do odd jobs, and so hired them.
I will say, I do very much enjoy when you talk to, say, Kate, I believe it is, the traffic cop outside. She mentioned, Lloyd mentioned, oh, it was great to help assist you with, I think gate duty or traffic duty this morning or yesterday or something of that nature. And I thought it was a nice bit of world building. The police do that. They have stuff happens off camera that impacts the relationships with the NPCs. And it was just nice to see.
Like something that you notice As I've been mentioning, I one of the reasons why it's taking me so long to play through these chapters is because I'm talking to everybody. Like, the first thing that I do when a new story beat hits is spend the next 2 to 3 hours going around talking to every single NPC. And so something that you tend to see with that is that now that there's been like a month since the incident in chapter 1, Crossbell Times picked it up and people have been reading about it, you're starting to see that the SSS is becoming an accepted part of Crossbell itself. And I really like that because it shows a growth. This is a dynamic city. We're living through a specific time period in which people change. But it's also not immediate. It's not, okay, you did this, now everybody loves the SSS. It's way more organic than that. It's fantastic.
It is, and I've been doing a lot more of that now after you said you were doing it and that you recommended it. And there's a lot of subtle, slow changes from one chapter to the next during the chapters. I don't want to say a Greek chorus because it's the wrong vibe, not as menacing, but the city feels alive. I've said it before, I'll say it now, I'm gonna say it again. It feels like a character.
There are like old Italian movies that my best friend used to make me watch, where he would just say things like, "Point is, in certain cinematic, in certain movies, the location is the main character," and I don't think that's the case here. But Crossbell is certainly a character, and therefore, like, you feel more attached to the place in a way I never felt this attached to Liberl. But Crossbell is like, it's a city that you really get to know just by playing the game, and it rewards you for investing your time in it.
And to be fair, I mean, to be clear, going from one city to the next, in FC and SC, it felt natural. If it's was so connected to the plot, and we both thought it was good. And we could still go back, I
Yeah,
think, one city at a time. We were in city A and went to city B. You could go back to city A, I believe, for most chapters, not all. But here, we have time to build such a big city and to give it depth in a way that very understandably you could not do for Belzé, for Rouen, even for Grand Cell in most aspects. And the construction is so well done. Different parts of the city look different and they feel different, and not even fishing can take that away from us.
so we know your thoughts on fishing. It's one of the Trails in the Pod memes. So let's move on to the next quest in our list, which is Rare Herb Retrieval. What did you think about this one?
It was great.
Okay, you say it's great.
Great.
So what is it, first off?
The actual quest itself is very linear. You go, the chief of internal medicine, I believe, at St. Ursula wants some herbs that the church has for use in medicine. Says, I've cleared it with the archbishop, just go and get it. You go, the archbishop is surprised, and then you learn that there's a history between them, that this doctor was training to be a priest. Maybe I think was a priest, but then left for medicine because he wanted to help people, but in a different way, not through the church-sanctioned route. It's a great look at modernity, at church and secular organization that are still, Saint Ursula. It's this nice thing there. It's individual relationships as a proxy, I guess, as a stand-in or an epitome, microcosm for larger societal trends and organization, and that's how you do it. You make it relatable and personable.
I think the personable thing is really key. Like, in terms of any of the church figures in FC or SC, with the exception of Kevin and Reese, who are main characters of the third that we spent a lot of time with, can you think of any defining personality traits of any of the church figures?
Hard ass for a certain thought deceased heroine of a novel.
What?
Cornelia. Einzelune.
Oh yeah.
Einzelite.
So yes, you do know her, but in terms of like going around to the different churches and talking to a priest or a nun or an archbishop, no, there's nothing there because they just serve to be like a quest giver or somebody you talk to for like a quest. That's it. Whereas here, through one quest, we've learned so much about the archbishop, right? We've learned A, that he's in charge of training other priests. B, that he's skilled in medicine.
Yeah.
C, that he's a prideful guy but that D, he doesn't let that pride get in the way of actually helping other people.
And we have a minute, maybe two, with him if you read slowly. It's not that much, but they jam so much characterization in the priest, and then with his mirror counterpart, the doctor at Saint Ursula.
And then the best part is that these characters still exist. We're going to be talking to them through not just this game, but then also in Azure, right? By laying the foundation so early, that's something that I really love about Zero. We talked about it last week, and I'm talking about it again. They threw so much at us so quickly, but that allows everything to continue to breathe as we play through the experience. Like, at this point, we've been through, like, 3 different locations outside of Crossbell, but we also have unlocked Tangram Gate and Pelgard Gate. We have the whole city of Crossbell. There's, like, 5 chapters in the game. We just finished Chapter 2. We got a whole lot of game left to just live in Crossbell. And I love that about this game.
How many doctors did we meet in the previous games, FCSC the third, as opposed to a healer? I don't think it's that many doctors at all. But here, and we see that doctor as opposed to healer is I don't want to say contentious, but they're aware of their relative newness on the stage, and they're seeking to differentiate themselves from the apparatus of the, often church-sponsored healer. They say we have different epistemologies.
Like, the only real mention of it that we see in FC or SC is that there's that girl who was the president of the student council during Lecter's tenure. So we see this in Trails the Third, actually. She goes back home to Remiferia. And Remiferia is like that. Remiferia is at the cutting edge of medicine. Which it's mentioned in this too, and I believe it's mentioned in the third. But
Yes,
that's it. That's
yes.
all that we saw. Whereas here, Saint Ursula really like epitomizes how Crossbell is entering what we would call the modern world. Which is a point that you wanted to make, I think, about Crossbell's modernity.
Yeah, not to beat a dead horse, but you know what? Fuck the horses. We're cars now. It would feel thematically disjarring, odd, alien to see this, a medical college, medical institution in Liberio, to see doctors in Liberio, to see the conversations, the diction that we have in Liberio. They feel very different thematically. And I'm not saying one's better than the other, just it's skillfully done.
Well, speaking of things that are skillfully done, why don't we talk about this jackass of a police chief who got so drunk that he lost his wedding ring?
Again, I don't want to stretch you wouldn't see this in Liberio too far, but the idea of, infidelity and hitting on a jazz bar waitress you'll leave your wife for, it would feel odd to run into that in Belzing.
Let's be clear, though. That woman is not a waitress. She is a hostess.
Hostess.
And basically, these are women who their job is to have drinks with. They are hired to be a companion for the night. Not necessarily in a sexual way, but this is something that you see a lot in the Yakuza games. That's what I'm drawing off of. But, like, let's say you're a guy and you go to a hostess bar, you don't just get a seat at a table. That table also will then have a woman that you then buy drinks for and chat and have a good time and stuff like that. I guess it's kind of like paying to have a date with somebody who's not on a date with you. But it's not just something that you see referenced here. It's a thing in Japan, at least as far as I understand.
Good to know. That kind of makes it sadder and yet also funnier at the same time.
Yes, it does. So, okay, so this police chief, I mean, he's been a jackass the whole time. I mean, Randy calls him Vice Commissioner Jackass or something like that, right? But throughout the entire chapter, if you talk to him, or especially on day 2, he's in, like, the break room, or the conference room, I should say, and he's, like, looking for something the whole chapter. If you're following a guide like we are in order to get the special quests, it's told, okay, now go talk to him. And apparently, he's lost his wedding ring. But more than that, he's deathly afraid of his wife. And so what appears to have happened was the night before, he got so drunk that he I forget precisely. Oh yeah, so he took off his wedding ring and gave it to the hostess in the Garante bar in order to say, like, I'm going to leave my wife and marry you. Probably because he's afraid of his wife, and he finally got liquid courage to leave her, which left him the next day. The way that we figure all of this out is that we use the superhuman nose powers of a dog named Zeit, our police dog, who Kevin is on record of hating, and has stating that nothing that Zeit can do will make Kevin like him. And there are two things that he's done in this chapter, one at the end of the chapter, and one now. So, what are your thoughts on Zeit?
He was okay. He did his job in this side quest, so I will give him all of the plaudits that go to someone who does the bare professional minimum. So, 1, 2 for Zeit. And I forget what he does at the end of the chapter. Remind me.
He's the one who pins down the assassin?
Oh, yes, he does. He pins down Mr. Ernest Hemming. Oh, Mr. Ernest the Aide. So, Zeit's okay. I'll give you that small concession. That was a fun little side quest, retracing his steps, and now the SSS has some prime piece of material if there's ever another intra-departmental spat to get the commissioner, the vice commissioner on their side.
Yeah. I believe that the experts call that a compromat.
We all know that compromise is the key to any successful relationship. And so the main plot of the chapter is about people saying, Ilya, why can't you compromise with Yin and cancel the show?
I don't believe that anybody asks Ilya why not just give in to the death threats. But we haven't gotten there yet. Because what I find interesting about the structure of this main quest... Well, before we get into that, this is now our second chapter. What are your impressions on the side quests in general? Like, are they better than what you saw in FCSC? Is there anything you'd like to see more of? Anything that you tweak?
They are. We had a good mix of combat and non-combat, of grinding, getting materials levels, of building out the world and the stories and the characters' placement within it. I guess the only thing is do something with the monster extermination. Spruce it up somehow. I'm not entirely sure how you would do it. I'm not even sure if it's possible or you should. Sometimes just having standard B minus, B whatever is okay. But there's not that much to talk about. But should that be a consideration? Should it just be go get a monster, have a small boss fight, do something a bit more challenging, at least ideally, than your run of the mill encounters?
Well, I think what they have to do is they have to make the encounters themselves memorable. I like the idea of having here's a mini boss to go fight. But if all they are is a bunch of monsters, that's not, I don't remember who we killed, and neither do you. And we did this pretty freaking recently.
Yes. So, make it memorable. But at the same time, some of the memorable fights that we've had in FC and SC are that way because they were so annoying. So don't make them annoying.
That's true. How would one make it, with this combat system, how would you make a fight memorable and not piss you off?
That's tough. It can't just be a sponge. A damaged sponge, make them health so high. I think maybe if you have, used certain types of art to disrupt or to open up weaknesses or stun them or stop a big attack, something like that could be good. Make it more thinky.
Yeah, something where you have to plot how you deal with their attacks. The Yin fight is kind of like that, right? Where you recognize that, and we are going way ahead afield here, but you realize, okay, Yin keeps creating these clones. I need to find a way to deal with those clones. But even then, like that's I found what I was looking for. Even
The
then, like
solution is don't.
the solution is use a lot of AOE. But that's a pretty standard thing. Okay, there's multiple people there, therefore you use AOE. Maybe blind them a little bit. But yeah, other than that, because maybe something with positioning can work. I
Yeah,
mean, that's what the system is built on. It's very spatially aware.
indeed.
So sometimes we see things like there was that orbital tank that we had to fight in the beginning of the third with Reese and Kevin, where you'd have to make sure you get out of the way before it rams you. That can be kind of interesting. But yeah, mostly it seems to me that the way that the system is designed, like, okay, the system is designed so that you can take advantage of certain things like turn orders, and it helps you take advantage of space. But in terms of actual difficulty, the only way to increase difficulty is increase the amount of damage that the boss can take by increasing HP, or increasing the amount of damage that the boss can do by just dealing you more damage. And neither of those really make it more engaging, if that makes sense. It's just something that you have to get over.
Yeah, and I wonder how future games will evolve on this structure, for which it's very good, but there are definite limitations as we have talked about.
Well, you know what else has limitations, Kevin?
And that's that for episode 58 of Trails in the Pod. Join us next Sunday as we dig into the main plot line for Chapter 2 of Trails from Zero.